Welcome to the Strong Life Coach podcast, where we have a very special guest, longtime friend, hero to me, father figure, a molder of men, high school basketball coach, Art Gonzales. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Derek, it's a pleasure. I hadn't seen you in a while, and it gives me an opportunity to catch up with you.
Yes.
So thank you for the invite.
Great excuse to be together. You know, and I mentioned this to you before, but your influence over men like myself, the way you shaped us. I describe my life maybe as a house. And in my house, I have a foundation, the foundation of my youth. And I feel like that foundation that is me, there's a Coach Art Gonzales fingerprints all over that foundation, because you've gave me principles. When I think about you, you're always under control, always uplifting, gracious. I don't think there was ever a time I could think of in the 4 years we were together at Highlands High School that you ever were condescending or ever were arrogant or ever were disrespectful. I think I can probably talk about you for quite a while, so we won't spend all the time talking about what I admire about you, but I want you to know how much I admire you as a man and how much I respect you as a leader.
Well, thank you, Derek. I tell you what, if I wasn't all that, my mother and father would be all over me. So, but I appreciate those kind words, and
Yes.
Always a pleasure to come back and talk with former students and players.
Yes, I'm excited. And even talking briefly before the show, I know you have so much content that people can learn from and benefit from the principles. I think people that are basketball players, people that are coaches, people that are teachers, I think just people in the community can take principles that you offer and use those to elevate their life and to pick people up.
Well, that's what teaching and coaching is about, is to help those that you are instructed, to lead. And that's what I enjoy doing. And to this day, there's always, with grandkids, there's always a teachable moment that you want to be able to express yourself to them and tell them, hey, this is the way it needs to be done.
Yes. And so when you think about the people tuning in, there might be some people that know you and know your journey, and there might be some people that don't. So I want to get a chance to learn how you became the head coach at Highlands High School, because I was there from 2000 to 2004. But I know there's so much more to your journey than just that little segment when I was there. So how did you become the coach there at Highlands? Like, take me back. We could go back to your playing days, or we could start at your coaching days, wherever you want to take us.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know if there's enough time, Derek, but we'll make an attempt here. Well, I graduated from Uvalde High School. I played football and basketball and did a little track, but I wasn't fast enough.
Okay.
So football and basketball were my main sports. I had two outstanding coaches, Coach Marvin Gustafson, who's already passed, rest his soul, and Jerry Comlander, who was my basketball coach at Uvalde. And I excelled a little more in basketball than I did in football. So maybe that's why I, became a basketball coach. So my first yearning to be a coach was, I guess, during my sophomore year in high school, and that has stayed with me.
Yeah.
I went to Texas A&I in Kingsville, got my degree, and my first coaching job was in Luling, Texas.
Wow.
And I was ninth and JV boys basketball coach, 8th grade football coach, and 8th grade track coach.
Oh, wow. They were stretching you thin back then.
I'm telling you, hey, those small schools, they need you to do everything, even drive a bus.
That's right.
But anyway, from Luling, I went to Jefferson High School. I was there for 2 years. Then I went over to Harlandale for 2 more years. And my wife's from Del Rio. I was fortunate enough to go to Del Rio and be the boys basketball coach there for 3. Then came back to Highlands for 1 year, 82, 83. And then took the basketball job at Burbank High School. And I was there for 7 years. Then back in 1991, I came back to Highlands. And so I was there from then to 2004. In 2004, I went to Alamo Stadium as assistant athletic director. And I was there till 2010 when I retired.
I see. Okay. Now, what would you say has been the most rewarding part of your leadership journey, whether that's coaching or any other role that you've had?
Gosh, there's quite a few. I think maybe trying to get the best out of kids, okay? Trying to teach them, what's right, what's wrong, what's fair, hard work. Make sure that there's hard work. One of my favorite sayings was, effort gets results.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't put any effort into something, the results aren't going to be very good.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the main things. And trying to better myself as a person,
Mm-hmm.
as a father, as a husband,
Wow.
and just things along those lines, and trying to show that, hey, life is great, life is beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and it's what you make it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting. You brought up the family outside of coaching, and what I've seen, there's so much sacrifice that takes place from these coaches that sometimes when you're a student, when I was a student at Highlands High School, I don't think I realized the sacrifice that the coaches were making in their personal lives. And so I had my own personal life, and I realized there are jobs out there where it's 8 to 5 and it's over, you're done, your job stays at work. Now, when you think about sacrifice, what did that look like for you in your journey?
Well, let me tell you, I guess maybe it was my 7th or 8th year in coaching, and we already had our family, started our family. My wife said, you know what, we had our children involved in other sports, basketball, soccer, and she was taking them to all these practices, and she says, you know what, I can't do this alone.
Wow.
And I says, you know what, you're right. I'll get out of coaching, and that way I'll be done after school, and I can help, with whatever needs to be done around the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way I stayed till the next morning. And I have a beautiful, lovely wife who is understanding and caring.
Yes.
And I mean,
smart man.
Anyway, the next morning she says, you know what? I thought about it. Stay in coaching. You won't be happy.
Wow.
So I will handle this. I will take care of this. In the meantime, you do what you need to do there.
Wow.
And so I mean, I was doubly blessed, and understanding and caring wife, and she was father and mother to our kids while I was still in coaching. So I owe a lot to her, and to this day she reminds me, hey, remember now. I says, I remember. So that, and then you take a lot of your weekends, especially after school is out in the summer, that you have your teams involved in tournaments, and you have basketball camps, and so you're gone a lot, and those are some of the things that people don't see.
Right.
People don't see. But
they might see the practice, they see the games, but that they don't see, even if it's film, they don't see the interactions, they don't see the conferences that some of the coaches go to, all of the additional responsibilities that come with the role. And you were teaching and coaching.
Right. Well, at Highlands, I was fortunate enough to be in the gym. I had physical ed. So that wasn't nearly as stressing as being in the classroom teaching, a core course. But still, you needed to have parent conferences and call home after hours, visit with parents. But yes, there's a lot that goes into coaching that's I guess in the background you don't see, keeping up with players' grades, keeping up with their behavior in the classroom, and things of that nature that maybe others don't do. But it is a trying and sometimes stressful job, but if you love coaching, if you love working with kids, if you love the challenge, hey, I'd recommend it to anybody.
Come on now. Well, I love that you praised your wife, and I think there is so much sacrifice that goes on the other side of the marriage, right? Because people will see you coaching, and they'll see you practicing, you'll see you leading this group of young men in the sport of basketball, but then they may not see everything that your wife is doing behind the scenes in your family. And it's such a powerful principle, I think, when somebody talks about their spouse supporting their dreams. I know this past year, after a 7-year career in the insurance industry, my wife and I were thinking about this new venture, and we were thinking about coaching and speaking, business coaching, working with leaders leaders and leadership, and then speaking, interviewing like we're doing now. And we wrestled with it. We prayed about it. There was fear, there was worry, because there was one avenue that's super comfortable. I've been in insurance, been in operations, have a leadership role. It's comfort, the pay is nice, but I felt called, like what I'm supposed to be doing with my life is primarily speaking, coaching, and interviewing. This is my calling. This is my purpose with that divine touch. But having a spouse, my wife, she was more enthusiastic about me changing than I was. I had more reservations, and typically it's reversed, and I'm a little more adventurous. But she was like, no, like, insurance is great. It's been good to you. Nationwide, it's been good to you. But what's going to help the most amount of people, and what's going to be the most fulfilling? And it sounds like you had a spouse who helped identify what's going to be most fulfilling to you, and was willing to make the sacrifices to make sure that you were in your calling.
And she did that. Let me tell you a funny story. We dated for 6 years, my wife and I. We met in college, and then 4 years, and then 2 years later, she said, you know what? I almost didn't marry you because it took you a long time to propose. But anyway, I says, well, because I wanted to make sure that you were the right one.
Okay.
But in doing that, I says, now look, I want you to understand something, that here's coaching. Back then, we didn't have the 5 days in Christmas that you can't practice. Mm-hmm. I says, with basketball, there's no Thanksgiving, and there's no Christmas or New Year's. It says, because we've got games, we've got practice, we've got games. So I just want you to understand that, that if you can, handle that, and if you agree to that, then hey, I think we're going to make a great couple. All right. And he says, well, I think she's also a teacher. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it kind of, we had the same holidays, we had the weekends, and except when basketball season started. Mm-hmm. So she agreed to that, and, here we are 44 years later.
44 years. What a beautiful testimony.
We're still negotiating. So
I love hearing that. I love hearing, 44 years, that is praiseworthy, noteworthy. I want to be like you. Hey, we're 6 years in, and we have, 38 years to go to get to 44?
Well, hey, you'll get there. You'll get there. Just, learn to give and take.
Now, you said y'all were dating, so were dating in college or after college, or how did that?
All during college. Mostly off and on, but we kept in touch. And then, we graduated. She was teaching in Del Rio, where she's from, mm-hmm. and I was in Luling, Texas. Mm-hmm. And so finally, July the 5th of 1975, we got married in mm-hmm. Del Rio, Texas.
All right. Okay. Well done. Now, when you take it back to your journey and you think about the person who most influenced you to become a coach, who was that?
Well, it'd have to be my high school coaches, Coach Gustafson and mostly Coach Comalander. He was my basketball coach. And as I said earlier, I was a little more successful in basketball. Now, I played football. I was tight end. And I was a defensive cornerback. Mm-hmm. But I guess football prepared me for basketball, and basketball prepared me for football. Yes. But anyway, Coach Comalander was the guiding light, so to speak, as far as me getting into coaching. Mm-hmm. And once I decided that that's what I wanted to do, I never looked back. I mean, I says, even to this day, I have lunch with him and another high school teammate that we meet. But he was. I have to take it back a little further because my father was had only a fourth grade education. He was a hard worker. Mm-hmm. And so he, I guess, set the seeds for me of, hey, this is what hard work is, mm-hmm. and this is what hard work involves, mm-hmm. and what it entails, and here's the end result. Yes. So if you want something, you got to work for it. Nothing's given out. So my dad, that combined with Coach Comalander's, coaching, and again, he was a stern man, but quiet, under control. and knew how to get the most out of his players.
Yes.
And so he's the one I attribute to me getting into coaching.
Now, so you said you knew you wanted to coach in your sophomore year of high school. That was you. Hey, this is it. This is what I want to do. So then you went to college, and then what did you study in college to help prepare you for that next step?
Well, you know, of course, the first 2 years is nothing but the basics. You know, you got to take your English, your math, you know, your history, you know, all your basic courses. And funny you asked that, because there was, out of my class in Uvalde High School, there was about 6 of us who had talked about being coaches. And out of those 6, only 2 of us became coaches. You know, others changed in the middle of the road there. I mean, the middle of the stream. Hey, no, this is not for me, you know. And I guess they were smarter because they went business, you know, and ended up making a lot of money. But hey, money's not everything.
That is right.
You know, but anyway, you take, after your basic courses, then you go into the coaching of football, the coaching of basketball, the coaching of track.
So kinesiology degree.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. And when you finished that degree, what was your family's response?
Well, being the first one on my father's side.
First one on
my father's
Big
side.
time.
And probably the third one on my mother's side. But on my father's side, I was the first one to get a college degree. And my dad didn't know that I was going to be a teacher and a coach. He just thought, hey, I was going to go into business or be a lawyer or something, you know, that brings in some money. But anyway, he was quite surprised, you know, when he found out that I was going to be a teacher and a coach. But my mother said, hey, that's what he wants to do. And that's okay with us.
That's right.
So, but I'm very thankful that my father enabled me to go to college. There are no college loans that I had to pay back. You know, him and my mom were able to save enough and scrape enough money to send me to college. You know, so I was very grateful for that. And the rest of my family on my father's side, they all were very proud and happy, and
I love that.
you know, so was I, of course, you know, but that added to the joy a little more.
Sure. I think it's one of the most powerful components of life in a leader's journey is their legacy and the path they give for people coming next. And when I think about you, of course, I know your legacy from a molder of men as a coach and shaping the future generation, but then even seeing that in your family going, well, there wasn't anybody before you when it came to the education side on your father's family, but you being able to be that example, that trailblazer, if you will. I'm gonna blaze this trail and set an example for my family to follow.
Well, I guess that continued when I started working on my master's. Now, believe it or not, right after I graduated and I was in Luling, Texas, I started my master's degree at Southwest Texas, now at Texas State. And after my first summer session that I started, I got a job in Jefferson High School here in San Antonio. So I dropped my master's program. You know, I think I lost, 12 hours that I'd already taken.
No.
So anyway, that was back in 77. And I didn't start on it again until 1988.
Wow.
And I started my master's in 88. I was coaching at Burbank High School, and I would go on weekends and during the summers. And I got my master's in a year and a half.
Wow.
And so my kids got to see that, and now one of them's got his master's, and I'm pulling for the other 2 to get theirs. But anyway, I guess like you said, hey, after you see somebody do something, they are a little more encouraged, I guess, to follow the same path, and so I'm happy for my youngest son Michael who got his this past December.
Love that.
So,
love to hear that.
But like you said, it's setting examples, and being the best that you can be at being a father, at being a husband, at being a teacher, at being a coach.
When you think about your legacy, I think about it's before I even knew the concept. It's being gracious, and you have a gracious. I could remember you coming down the hall, and I had a bag of hot Cheetos in my hand, and you'd come by. You say something nice and uplifting to us, pick a hot Cheeto out, and then eat it, and then keep on going. But I don't know if there was ever a day I've ever saw you during those 4 years of high school where you weren't uplifting and gracious. Where do you think you picked that up from?
Again, from upbringing. My mother, to this day, bless her heart, and I thank God that my mom is still alive. She'll be 89 in September.
Wow.
She still drives. But she was always this person who greeted you with a smile in the morning, and put you to bed with a kiss at night. And she said, you owe everything to Almighty God, and don't ever forget that, and don't forget to be considerate about others. And then for a while there, for about a year, I lived with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, and of course they were older, more mature, and they too were very giving and very understanding. So I have to say that my grandmother Soledad Rodriguez gave me a lot of that, and my dad was also a jokester, I guess you could say. He was always trying to make people laugh, and so I guess a little bit of that, and again, hey, sure, you can wake up every morning and look at all the negatives in life, but what good does that do?
That's right.
So better to be happy than to be sad or angry, and that's what I try to live by.
Sure, spot on. I do want to. There's a few of the players that played for you that wrote on Facebook. I told them that you were going to be joining the podcast, and they put a few questions. So I want us to be able to turn to those. Maybe the first one we'll read from is from Chris Ray. He said, "What was the toughest loss you experienced as a head coach, and what did you learn from it?"
Gosh. Well, of course, there's been several. There's been several tough losses, but I guess the biggest one was I was coaching at Burbank. And we were the second place team that year in district. And our first opponent, or our only opponent at that time, was going to be East Central. And back then, East Central was averaging 100 points.
Whoa.
Over 100
at
points.
High school level.
At high school level, 100 points a game. And so we worked all week in trying to slow it down and making the extra pass and, looking before we passed the ball, because they were a swarm of bees. They were all over. They trap you all over the floor. Well, anyway, got down to the game. It was going back and forth. And with about a minute, 2 left in the game, it's tie game, 75-75. And my best player, Humberto Saravia, is at the line shooting a 1-and-1. And my assistant coach asked me to call a timeout. And I didn't want to call a timeout because I didn't want to freeze my own player.
Right.
He was my best player, best free throw shooter. And so he's at the line, and well, he misses the front end of the 1-and-1, and of course they get a shot and miss. Well, we're going in overtime, and with a time running down, we lose 81-80.
Whoa.
And unfortunately, we didn't get the last shot, but anyway, that was tough, in that we had the leading scoring team on the ropes, and we let it slip through, and it was tough. But nonetheless, I was very proud of that team, very proud of the players. Hey, we had an incredible year that year in district, and I always remember that one. I guess others were in the playoffs. We lost in the first round to several Northside schools, to mainly Taft, Jay, and Marshall. Holmes was another one. But like I said, that's part of coaching. That's part of the game. And you just have to learn to get through it and let your gut feeling, tell you what you thought you did wrong. But as long as the players tried and gave it their all, that's all any coach could ask for.
Right. Now, you brought up the north side. I think there's something there. When you were coaching, so you were 14 years at Highlands High School.
Yes.
And then before that, so regarding the district in that side of town, it was more years than just 14. How many total years were you on the southeast or south side of town?
Well, let me take you back. I was 2.5 years at Luling. I was 2 years at Jeff. I was 2 years at Harlandale. I was 3 years at Del Rio. I was 7 years at Burbank, and I was 14 years at Highlands.
Okay. So we're talking 20 plus years.
30 years coaching.
30 years coaching, 20 plus years on the southeast side of San Antonio specifically. Did you ever consider some of the Northside coaching opportunity? And if so, yes, if yes, if no.
Well, of course. I mean, you always want to see where, the greener pasture is, but they say if you water your side, it'll get greener. So
Right.
I remember one year when I went to Harlandale, Clark had just opened up.
Okay.
And the head coach at Clark called me back after my first year. My first year at Harlandale, we were 1-27.
Oh, that's
I'll
rough.
take it. I'm sorry, 3-27. But I'll tell you about that. Those 3 games were one against the same school, and it was East Central. I was back before they were, the big school. Well, anyway, at the end of the year, the coach from Clark calls me up. Says, Art, I know you had a disastrous year. We'd like you to really come back to Clark. I mean, to come to Clark, and be my assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Coach Grimes, I appreciate it. I'm flattered. However, after going 3-27, I can't leave here. I mean, it's not right for me to leave. And so the following year, we were 12-18 and did a lot better. But of course, you want to go where you have better facilities, not necessarily better players because they're developed, but facility wise, you always want to go where you have an air conditioned gym. You have more than just one gym. You can have 2 for to be able to share. But I loved coaching in the southeast and the south part of San Antonio. I could identify with those kids. It was kind of the way I was raised, the way I grew up. Sure. And I have no doubts and no regrets about not going to Northeast or Northside.
You brought up something fascinating, I think, which is about the facilities. And so you've 30 years into it. What can you say about the drastic difference in the quality of facilities from one location to another?
Well, one of them, the biggest one in South Texas, is air conditioned. Mm-hmm. Now I understand that Highlands now is air conditioned.
Hey, we got that now.
It wasn't when I was there, or when we were there. But anyway, the air conditioning is one. Is although some coaches say it's a detriment, and because players get used to that, and when you go to a hot gym. But anyway, that's neither here or there. And a place to practice. Sometimes we only had an hour or an hour and a half because the girls were coming in behind us, or we needed the JV to practice, or the freshmen to practice. Whereas if you go to the school that has 2 competition gyms, then you have an advantage because you have a little more time, plus you have a little more space, and you can do a lot more things. So when you're limited to one gym, for six different teams, and if you had a sophomore team, that's 7 teams. Right. It's kind of hard. It limits your time that you can have with the kids.
And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a time period where we had basketball as a class, but then there's a time period where it wasn't even every day. It was like every other day. Yes. And again, back then, as a student, I don't know what's normal until I get older. I'm not in high school anymore, and I talk to people, and it's like, wait, y'all didn't even have the basketball class every day. It was every other day, which it just throws. I could see how it could throw off the momentum.
Well, yeah, I think that when we first started with that, I think we had a time period where we could meet every day. Okay. And then it tapered off to where they dropped that. But for a couple of years, we were able to meet at least an hour because classes were an hour and a half. And so you could go an hour, and that was about it. But that was a hard situation, in that you couldn't meet with your students every day. You couldn't meet with your athletes and at least tell them hello, and
Right.
and how's your day going. But those situations are tough.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you think about the expectations from a coach, even administratively, and the stress that comes on that side of it, I know you mentioned going 3-27. What is that stress and pressure like for people who haven't coached and who don't know the pressure that comes from even just keeping your job? What is that pressure and stress like?
Well, a lot of times people don't know that maybe administrators or a board would expect more, and this is mostly for schools that are maybe a one high school town where there's a little more pressure. And I've been, in several of those situations, and it's tough because, hey, you're talking about your livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about supporting your family, and if somebody tells you, hey, you got to win X number of games to keep this job, wow. It kind of you kind of start thinking, man, what do I need to do? Mm-hmm. And that kind of stress, is added along with the stress of competing against your opponent. Mm-hmm. And I would always try to tell my players this is that, hey, look, it's hard enough competing against our opponents without having to fight amongst ourselves.
That's right.
But the stress with coaching, it becomes tremendous at times, and a lot of coaches sometimes kind of give in to that stress and mm-hmm. do some things maybe they shouldn't do, sure. simply because, hey, they want to keep their jobs.
Mm-hmm. It's intriguing to me to consider the person behind the coaching job, because you can see a coach sometimes and you can see maybe anger, or you can see rage, or you can see sometimes you see some of the unpleasant things, but sometimes it's important to remember what's contributing to that behind the scenes. And to be told you have to win a certain amount of games, I imagine in the leadership role, you're asking, what do my players need to see more of? Do they need to see more passion, more anger? Do they need to, you're willing to try out different things in the name of winning. But it's crazy to think about. I think it causes me to have more empathy and compassion for coaches that have these expectations that oftentimes the public doesn't know about.
I'm grateful that I only had to experience that one time. Mm-hmm. But I have a friend who was also a coach, and unfortunately, his board member put undue pressure on him. Not so much number of games, but hey, you have to win the district championship. Ooh. Okay, to keep your job, wow. Because that's what we are and that's what we do. Or if it wasn't the district championship, at least the playoffs. Mm-hmm. You got to make the playoffs. So yes, unfortunately, there's situations that is still happening. Mm-hmm. And but I guess that's the nature of the game.
Mm-hmm. And maybe we hit this already, but I know another question Chris Ray asked was, what was the worst part of coaching?
To be honest with you, it's the parents.
I was wondering if we were going to touch that or not, but hey, keep it real.
I tell you what, it finally got to the point in my career, I would always tell our parents when we had our parent coaches meetings, is look, I can meet with you anytime you want, as long as you set up an appointment. Mm-hmm. But the thing that we will never discuss is your son's playing time.
Wow.
Okay. I see your son every day. I know what he can do. Mm-hmm. I know how he is. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I am the better judgment as to how much he plays, who plays, mm-hmm. and so that's one thing that we will never discuss if you want to meet with me about your son.
Wow.
Other than that, hey, we can talk. Mm-hmm. But fortunately enough, I didn't have very many, mm-hmm. Parent conferences, at least not in my latter part of my career. Mm-hmm. Early part of my career, yeah, they always wanted to talk about, hey, my son, made this team and he made that team and he's an all-star here. And but parents fail to realize that, and I know because I had sons that played basketball, and I had sons that played in the AAU and played in the Tri-City where we live, and as little kids, and even there I saw parents complaining. And my best advice was the advice I said, hey, keep your mouth shut, go to the top of the bleachers, enjoy the game. Don't yell out, don't instruct, don't. So yeah, I mean, I think parents are, of course, I mean, being a parent, your kid is the most precious thing that you have, and you want the best for them, understandably so. But again, there's certain guidelines and certain things they have to meet, to get there.
There's when I think about today and coaching today, and then how technology has advanced, because I remember I was talking to a head coach recently, and he's a head basketball coach. He was talking about the amount of messages he gets from parents, like text messages, and which that idea was like blowing my mind, because in my head at least I was thinking, well, so that's like a public thing, like your phone number is open to the players and the parents, and that's just known, they can contact you whenever. Because and of course in my time when I was in high school, I wouldn't dream of like calling you at home or something like that, right? Or I wouldn't. I know we just were getting cell phones, I think, during that time period. But it's crazy to think about the access that the parents have to the coaches these days to do more of the potential complaining or criticizing as far as what's happening with the game.
Well, I didn't get my first cell phone till I went to the athletic office in 2004. So maybe that was good for me. But yes, nowadays I think that you need to get at least your phone number to the parents. And I think maybe you need to go one step further and say, hey, unless it's an emergency, I would not care to hear from you. But it's only here for an emergency. Not to, why didn't my son play, or why did you take him out, or why? But yes, hey, it's amazing, and it's unreal how that has exploded into, coaches, getting criticized, coaches, getting fired, coaches, I'm not talking about high school, but coaches in general.
Now, did you ever think about next level, or do you even think about the coaching at the collegiate level or any other level of basketball other than high school?
No, I tell you what, by that time I've heard so many stories about recruiting. Hey, and you'd gone. After my first year of coaching, the assistant basketball coach at A&I, Richard Shoebrooks, I get a phone call, and I'm still single, and he says, Art, I'm looking for an assistant basketball coach. I take it back, a graduate assistant. He says, and we will pay for your master's. And Derek, I had just gotten the head basketball job at Luling. I was an assistant, and the following year I got it as the head coach. And I says, Coach Shoebrooks, I appreciate the offer, but hey, I just got the basketball job, and so I turned it down. And maybe who knows what had happened? I mean, hey, but from the standpoint of the recruiting, sure, it's challenging, and it's inviting, and I mean, hey, you look at it and say, man, but no, I never did never look into going into college coaching.
Okay. Another question Now, this one is from Eric Ruiz.
Oh my goodness.
He asked, how difficult was it to adapt your coaching to different generations? Because you did it for 30 years.
Yes.
So how difficult was it to adjust your coaching to different generations?
Well, not much, other than, hey, keep parents informed. In other words, injuries. Okay, injuries, accidents. I remember one time we were in a tournament in Victoria, and one of my players got cut on the elbow. And it was a pretty deep cut. I'm sure they were messing around. They were in their room. And so I had to call home. And sure enough, their parents showed up, and we took them to the hospital and had a couple of stitches. But mostly keeping parents informed. Kids are kids. They will do what you allow them to do. And the key word there is allow. So, I mean, as long as you set forth your expectations and say, this is what I expect and this is what you will do, in order to remain a member of this group. So yes, some parents were a little more vocal, some parents were a little more involved, but you had to teach kids that, hey, adversity will always be in your life, and you've got to learn how to handle adversity. Yes. And I think maybe that's the biggest thing going on right now is our young people, our players nowadays, they need to learn how to handle adversity. Right. Because if you let one thing that goes wrong set you off, you're going to let anything set you off. It becomes a habit. So if they can learn to handle adversity, that was my biggest thing.
There's this memory I have of you. Speaking of adversity, is I was in 6th grade, and there was a little Al Slammers League that would happen during the summer times. And so it was me and Chris Rico were on teams. And Tony Molina and Adam King were actually on teams. Adam played a little bit when we were freshmen, but I remember we were playing against each other. And I think we were winning by like 3. We only scored like 15 points a game, so we didn't score much. But I remember I got the ball, and we were up by like 3 with like 2 minutes left, and I shot a 3, and it happened to go in. So I was like, but I remember you actually pulled me aside. You were one of the referees, yes. And you said, like you didn't have to shoot that, and it's crazy to think about. So 6th grade, this is what, I'm 12, I'm 30. This is a 21 years later, I remember you're talking to me about poise and about understanding your situation, knowing the time, and also being intelligent with what you're doing. But it's crazy to think about that lesson of poise, because I think about it for you embody it so well, but I think it's relevant with adversity, because if you can remain calm and peace and aware of your situation in adversity, it can help you through so much in life.
Exactly. And that's what I was trying to convey, is that, hey, this is a game. It's a game. If you can't control yourself and handle yourself in the game, how are you going to do it in life, in real life? I mean, in actual situations where, hey, you need to stop and think, and if I go this way, it's going to be the right thing to do. If I go that way, it's going to be the wrong thing to do. So that's one thing that I always try to instill and show our players, that, hey, look, you've got to get through adversity. You got to think of what you're doing, and then look before you pass.
That's right. And it's a beautiful lesson of adversity. And of course, my story of with my dad and his suicide when I was 17. And some people, ask me, why do I bring it up the way I do? Because to your point, it was that adversity that I came through. And seemingly when I compare that adversity to everything else that I've been through, I know most other situations are less intense and they're a lot more easy. But if I can handle that situation well, which I don't think I did at the beginning, because I remember failing in my Spanish class with the 40 and failing my pre-calc class with the 17.
It was a tough time.
Failing off the track team. But learning how to overcome that, to persevere and to endure during that season of adversity has given me incredible confidence for everything else that I'm facing in life. Because I know 99.99% of the situations that I'm going to face in my life won't be as tough as that. But to your point, if I can be resilient through this adversity, then I'm going to be prepared for the rest of my life for problems that come my way. And I'm going to be ready to triumph over those problems that come my way.
And here you are.
Here we are.
Okay, so that is fantastic. But no, hey, I remember this from an old coach saying, hey, if you can approach coaching and coach the kids as if they were your own, you are going to be in a much better place.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've looked at it, as those players that I worked with as being my own, you know, and for the most part they were. I mean, because
I felt that. I felt that you were a father figure in my life, no doubt.
Well, thank you. But I mean, to this day, I mean, I think that, hey, I was with you every day, except Sundays, of course, you know, and trying to build you up, I guess, build the players up, you know, to seeing that they could be more than what they thought they were.
Yes, absolutely. I do want to take us back to the bus driver part of your journey, because I remember, again, then I didn't know if it was anything significant when we had I think it was a tournament, or it might have been a post-season in between a couple of games out of town. I think it was in the town just north of Austin. Is it not Little Rock? It's
it was in Pflugerville.
Is it Pflugerville? Okay. So it was in Pflugerville, but I remember not just that time, but several other times as well. You weren't just our head coach and then the coach of our physical education at the high school, but then you were bus driver. So what was actually happening behind the scenes?
Well, back then, our transportation situation was that you had to use the VIA bus, okay, to get you to games. And a lot of times, VIA would get there late. And as a result, you were getting to your game late, and you didn't have time to get dressed or warm up, or you know, they would cancel you out, and you'd have to wait for another bus. And so I said, you know what, we need to do better. So I went and got my CDL and bus driving, and now I was able to leave whenever we needed to leave, and go wherever we needed to go without having to get transportation, you know, to come get us, you know. So, hey, that was just another thing. As I mentioned before, when I was at Luling, I had to drive a bus. So, I mean, I was a little aware of the situation as far as what it entailed, but you weren't required to do that. And I was one of the first to get my CDL and start driving the bus. As a matter of fact, even the football team used me to
Did they?
to take them to go eat at the Highlands Cafe.
Okay, there we go. I remember that Highlands Cafe. It's not still there, is it?
It's still there, but I think it's under a different name.
Different name.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. Well, I know we want to be closing it up in just a few moments, but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about legacy.
Okay.
And when you think about your legacy, and then for people who are thinking about their legacy and wanting to leave something behind, I think, of course, I think about your children, your grandchildren, your ex-players. What does your legacy mean to you?
Well, I'm hoping that it meant that, hey, I would get our players and students to do the best they could with what they had, and think of others. Think of others. Don't just think of yourself. Thank your parents. You know, care for your brothers and sisters. You know, be considerate, of course. You know, and I guess, like I said before, it was the effort gets results, and the less effort you put into it, the less results you're going to get out of it. And I just wanted to make sure that that they could see that they could better themselves simply by being disciplined, under control, you know, and being able to think for themselves instead of having some other people think for them. And, you know, basically, you know, that was it, is help others. We're here to help each other. And to me, that was the bottom line.
Yes. Well, I love the idea of helping each other. And even you as a coach, there's competition is a part of your world as a coach. You're competing constantly, but it's something that I've seen with your journey, and something I've been learning about my own life too, because I grew up playing a lot of one-on-one basketball. You know, you play one-on-one, and in that one-on-one phase of the sport, what I found myself doing is when my opponent is shooting, I find myself wanting them to miss. And when my opponent makes a mistake, I find myself rejoicing. Now, in one-on-one, it's completely fine and okay because they're my opponent. Their mistakes are beneficial to me. But I've learned I need to separate that one-on-one philosophy from life, because when I'm in life and my friend gets a house or my friend's house burns down, I don't need to rejoice about my friend's house burning down. I just need to mourn with them. And because I like how you said helping one another, even as coaches, I know you've talked about your journey. There's so much benefit from even opposing coaches who, when you're on the court, you want your team to beat their team.
Exactly.
But outside of that, you could have a great bond and connection, and even you can open up doors for each other down the road.
Well, most of us that were in SAISD, most of us are retired now. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, we still get together for lunch and reminisce and go over those things. But yeah, during the game, we want to beat each other's brains out. Mm-hmm. After the game, hey, we're shake hands. Best team won, and let's go on. Let's go on. But yeah, hey, I wouldn't feel right if I did something that was that would hurt you, unless we were in a game, of course. I wouldn't want to hurt you intentionally, sure. But I wouldn't feel right if something bad happened to you, and I wouldn't be there to help offer my condolences or whatever the case would be. At the same time, I would want to be there to rejoice with you if on, like you said, maybe the purchase of a new house or the birth of a child or getting your master's or getting married, So life is beautiful, Derek, and you make it out what you make it out to be. I mean, if it doesn't mean much to you, well, that's the way life's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, we're going to close it out with one final question from Eric Ruiz. But before that, I want you to know there's so much you have to offer people. People know that my show, it's about showcasing people's journey, your leadership journey, showcasing your expertise, sharing principles that help other people, building up my guests, and then benefiting people. But I just had to have a great conversation. But I just want you to know you're always welcome. So if there's ever a time, just so you know, whenever you want to come back, you are more than welcome to share your expertise and to benefit people that are tuning in. So I want you to know that.
Well, I appreciate that, Derek. And I tell you what, I appreciate you asking me to come because, you and I are on the same wavelength as far as what can we do to help others? Yes. What can we do to help coaches? What can we do to help players? What can we do to help, anybody in life, And so thank you for that. And I'm very proud of the man that you've become.
Thank you.
Well, back from when you were a senior, guarding the 6'7" postman from Southwest. But hey, I've appreciated you and thank you. Wish you the best.
All right, thank you. No, we'll take the last question we'll touch then is Eric Ruiz said, who was the better basketball player, Chris Ray or Eric Ruiz?
Oh my goodness. Well, I tell you what, I think for those of us that know both of those players, we probably would say, Chris Ray was, because he was a little taller, But I tell you what, Eric Ruiz had the skills. I'm telling you.
Yeah, the skills.
Hey, he had the skills. He had the desire. He had the motivation. Now you were talking about going back when you were little. I got to see him in one of those elementary games at Highlands. And
he was in that league. Yes.
Yeah, and when he lost, he would always cry. Because that's how much it meant to him. So, Chris, I love you and I respect you, and I also admire the person you become. But at this point, we'd have to give it to Eric.
Okay, so
Eric had the better sense, I guess, to a basketball sense, to be out there and do what he needed to do.
What you did though right now is a beautiful thing, and it's completely you because you're gracious. Like I asked you a question that has one or the other, and you find a way to lift both of them up and to build them up. That's just what you do. But again, Thank you for the show. If you're tuning in, get a chance to like the podcast, share it, and subscribe to it. We'll get great content like this. The Strong Life Coach Podcast. We speak life, coach life, write life, and lead life. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Derek.